What we say in habit 9 is to prohibit manipulative marketing tactics, because Proverbs 11:1 says, a false balance is an abomination to the Lord.
You use the phrase all for his glory. What do you mean by that? That business could fall into this idea of all for his glory.
And so I think God takes that issue very, very seriously. What is God's perspective on this thing that he really created?
Hey guys, Jim Piper back in the saddle again here at the Today Counts show. I have with me as my guest today, Darren Shearer. Fascinating story. We'll get into a little bit of that, I'm sure, about his life and what he's doing. But I want to turn you on to 3 URLs right now. You can come back and listen to it. We'll have it in the show notes as well. But theologyofbusiness.com, highbridgemedia.com, and highbridgebooks.com. Darren, did I get that right?
Nailed it.
All right, Neil. Oh, good. At my age, hey, that's a big thing to celebrate. Trying to keep my thoughts together. I want to introduce you to our listening audience by talking about this idea that I really enjoy, which is theology of business. In my work across the nation, I have the joy and the honor of working with ministry leaders, business leaders at high levels in corporate America, in the world of entrepreneurialism, in small companies, anywhere from 50 to 500 to 1,000 employees, and of course, business is challenging. Business, because we're dealing with people, we're dealing with customers, employees, stakeholders, et cetera. And so the whole idea of theology of business intrigues me, right? You got this URL, theologyofbusiness.com. It intrigues me because I use the term theology a lot in my advising and in my training. Talk to us about theology of business. Where are you coming from with this idea, theologyofbusiness.com?
Yeah, good question, Jim. And I'm excited to be here. So centuries ago, the church understood theology as the queen of the sciences. So you didn't understand biology, or you didn't understand mathematics, or any other study that is in the academy, apart from your understanding of theology, because it all starts with the Creator, and this is what the church taught, and what our an understanding that our universities really grew out of. So theology it's the study of God. Theology of business is the study of God in business, or the study of God, as you mentioned previously, theology of psychology, or what is God's perspective on this thing that he really created, and so that's probably my favorite field of study. I really enjoy business, and I love God, and it just fills me with a tremendous sense of purpose to be able to approach business with an understanding that it's all for his glory, and that he created it, and that he knows all about it. And if I want to be able to do business with a clear conscience and do it effectively in a way that's really providing a great service for people, then I need to do it in partnership with God.
That's good. You use the phrase "all for His glory." What do you mean by that? That business could fall into this idea of all for His glory.
Yeah. Well, I'll boil it down to this, and it's the first habit that I talk about in this book, The Christ-Centered Company, which is that it's the habit of viewing Jesus as being on the receiving end of everything that we do in business. So, Jesus, he said that if you've done it to the least of these, you've done it to me. If you haven't done it to the least of these, you haven't done it to me. And elsewhere it says in Colossians that do your work as working for the Lord, not for men, because it's the Lord Christ you serve. And so Jesus is not just, I like the phrase, gee, God is my CEO, God is the chairman of the board and all these things, but he's also your entry level employee. He's also that contractor that you're really frustrated with. He's also in John Chrysostom, one of the church fathers, talked about the altar of the brother. And so in every interaction that we have with somebody in the marketplace, whether it be a customer or whoever it is an opportunity to serve God, and because God is ultimately on the receiving end, and we're going to be held accountable for how we relate to people in business, which is where most of us spend most of our waking hours.
I just released my next book called Story. I'm holding it in my hand here. Story, the Art of Learning from Your Past. It's broken up into 3 sections: the things we can learn from our childhood, our most significant relationships, and our leadership experiences. I hope that you will pick up a copy on Amazon, and I would love it if you read it and told your friends about it, and maybe leave a review, a 5-star review on Amazon. Would certainly appreciate it. Again, the book is Story, the Art of Learning from Your Past. I don't know that I've ever heard it coined that way before, but the idea that the creator is on the receiving end of everything that I think and do and deliver and produce, that's a pretty convicting and encouraging idea. It kind of reminds me of the day that when I was very young, hadn't finished my undergrad yet, but I was thinking about transferring to another school. We were looking at a private Christian school in Southern California at the time, and my wife walked in and we met with the department head of business. And he was a big old guy. I forget what his name was, but he sat back in his chair with his big booming voice. He says, "Jimmy," says, "all business is God's business." And that has stuck with me, because I think as a young man, I did differentiate, working at the bank where I worked versus going to church, or what is this and what is that? It was not just a separation of state; it was a separation of mind. Literally had 2 different things going on in there. You also made me think about uh, this idea of accountability, because when I think about the creator being on the receiving end, one of the things that I hear leaders complain about often is accountability, but that so much starts with a sense of self-respect, a sense of purpose, a sense of understanding that my life does matter, and I will give an account of my life. So it's just a powerful thing. Um, so what motivated you to this whole process of writing this book, and creating this URL, the theology of business.com? What you probably have a story here.
Yeah. Well, it really kind of started. So I grew up in church. My dad was my pastor. And not that my dad ever would have even suggested anything like this, but my paradigm for what ministry was this is something that happens in a church building or in a church type program, or on the mission field, something that is going to be, but whatever the pastors sort of affirm, that's what real ministry is. And business people were never really being affirmed, apart from giving in the offering, giving to building projects and things like that. And so that was sort of what I just kind of learned growing up. But I was in the Air Force, and I was leaving the Air Force base one particular day, getting ready to go do some volunteer work through my church. I was doing parking lot ministry and street evangelism and playing guitar on the worship team and several other things. And the Lord spoke to me and said, this Air Force base is your ministry. I was a service member at the time. And that was where it really shifted for me that I really need to focus. My primary stewardship is the primary place where I spend most of my time. And so a few years later, I went to seminary, went to business school. And then about the time I finished business school, I published a book called Marketing Like Jesus, because it just occurred to me that the grade is in business school. It's all about Steve Jobs and Richard Branson and, more recently Elon Musk. Um, but these guys don't have anywhere close to the level of influence that Jesus has had throughout the millennia. 1 out of 3 people in the world claim to be a follower of Christ, and so I just began to really study the Gospels, and particularly looking at the marketing influence. And I define marketing as strategic influence. It's deliberate influence. The marketing strategies of Jesus as throughout his life and ministry, as presented in the 4 Gospels. And then came out with a book shortly after that called The Marketplace Christian, which was about applying spiritual gifts in business, because a lot of us think the only place you can, if you even believe you can use spiritual gifts today, that they're just sort of for the congregational setting. But no, a gift of administration is not just when you're counting the offering. It's when you're running your business. It's when you're doing payroll. It's when you're you're bringing order out of chaos. And then the Christ Center Company came about 10 years later, just this past year. So it's been a long time in the making.
That's really good. You said something that not everybody says. Earlier on, you said the Lord spoke to you. The Lord spoke to you. For some people hearing that, they're going, well, how come God talks to Darren but doesn't talk to me? Or they're going, what? That's weird. This guy's hearing voices. What do you mean, Darren, when you say that God spoke to you?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't an audible voice. I can tell you that. But, hand in hand with this principle that that God is on the receiving end of everything we do in business, he also wants to partner with us. He wants to be right there with us. We have a scriptural command to pray continually. So I guess another way of asking that question would be, what does it mean to pray continually? And I've heard it said that prayer is your spiritual breathing. And so we ought to just constantly be asking, like, God, is this consistent? Like, is this kingdom? Is this consistent with your ways, with your will? And so when you're in an attitude of prayer, you're always asking that question. And I was, when you begin to get dissatisfied with something that, in my case, just seeing the traditional church model of, let's just pack everybody into, to hear a sermon in rows on Sunday morning, when the mandate is to make disciples, which you have to be doing life with somebody to be able to disciple them. I love what Oswald Chambers says: spiritual truth is learned through the atmosphere that surrounds us, not through intellectual reasoning. So there's no amount of sermons that's really going to transfer, or more Christian content, more podcasts. You and I love podcasts, but it's got to be through the atmosphere that really impacts people. But that was just something that I was kind of dissatisfied with, and it was just sort of I was, when the student is ready, the teacher appears, and the Lord was ready to just give me that revelation, which was, like I said, not an audible voice, but it was just a conviction that this is just the way things are. My ministry, my primary ministry, is on this base where he has assigned me.
When you just use the term conviction, which is the word I was literally thinking about when Christians talk about hearing from God, or being moved by God, or being directed by God. I think in many cases, not all cases, but I think the word conviction fits that, right? It fits that. And I think about a little bit of my story. I was a manager of the bank, and I began to get a conviction. I began to get a vision for the people who worked for me. Being a believer at the time, and seeing some of the folks come in on Monday morning with hangovers, not just once, but on a continual basis, and just seeing a lifestyle that is very defeating, and knowing that that's just a symptom of other things. Not that I'm running around judging all my employees, but then the marriage difficulties, and the difficulties with their children, and difficulties with their health, and all the different things that can happen to us as human beings. I went from in fact, I did not give it to myself, but you talked about organizational breathing, which is another term that I use for good collaboration. I mean, that's the healthy side, but sometimes the organization can breathe back some pretty bad breath, that you need to think through. But I remember I began to go from this bank manager mindset to shepherding these people in an altruistic way. Yes, I had to teach them how to be bankers. That was part of it. Teach them about, risk, teach them about this, teach them about that, but also, learning how to care for them, where the organization began to breathe back to me, and they would do it with some fun, but they would often introduce me to some people where they would say, let me introduce you to Jim, the manager of our bank. Right. And so, though I ended up going into ministry, often the way we hear God speak to us is we get convicted, and we're beginning to align with something that's near and dear, to his heart. I think it was Henry Blackaby who said that a lot of people, take off in life, and then they ask God to bless it and to join him, or her in it. Whereas maybe it would be wiser for us to notice, what is God already doing, and then join him in what he's doing. But how do you know what God is doing? He lifts up your head. He lets you see things that you didn't see last week, or the month before that, or the month before that. Right. And so I really track, with what you're saying, but I just think that, for those of you who are listening, and you get convicted to the heart that something is right, or something that is wrong, or something needs to be done, that could be very much what we're talking about here. We may not be that separated. I'll give you another example. In the book of Psalm, chapter 1, there is a dark poetic descent that happens. That it talks about, blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, or stand in the way of sinners, or sit in the seat of scoffers. And when you look at the poetry in that, you can see the intentional descent, where sometimes, we just walk by, we observe, we hear. The next thing you know, we're stopping, and we're considering, and we're fellowshipping, and then it leads us to a place where we park ourselves. And that's what a dark descent is. But then it changes rapidly into verse 2, where it says, remember, it starts off with blessed, the blessed man, the blessed man. So he avoids that descent. So what does he do instead? He delights in the law of the Lord. Now, and he meditates on it day and night. And there's a lot of folks, even in the Christian circles, who they really don't like the term law. And I don't understand that, because to me, law means logic. If we take another step back, it means engineering. It means architecture. And you follow that all the way back to a person, to the creator. And so to me, law is not simply this concrete list of do's and don'ts. It's when you speak to your 2-year-old, you don't try to explain the world to them. You tell them, do this, don't do that. And when they get older, hopefully they appreciate the why behind it. So as we grow in faith, we kind of graduate from the concrete, do this, don't do that, to understanding the why behind it. So, you know, just want to encourage those that are listening. So when we talk about hearing from God, we're talking about this connection. We're talking about this, wow, he's pulling me to another level, another way of consciousness. And often actions follow that. And it's a beautiful way to live. I want to tell one more story because this is right down your line. Real quickly, I'm having lunch. This way back in the day, way back in the day. I couldn't even grow a mustache. Way back in the day. And my pastor is just leaning into me intensely. It was at McDonald's. And we're eating at McDonald's. And this is the day of pagers. My pager goes off and it says, hey, it basically gave me a code that says, get your butt back to the bank. We have an emergency. So I go back to the bank. I get ushered into this conference room and we have a crisis going on. But remember where my consciousness was at the time. My consciousness was literally across the street at McDonald's, but it was a God conversation. I don't remember what we were talking about, but it was intensely about God. And so my mind was still on that. It wasn't on banking. When I walk into this conference room, they explained to me this critical dilemma. And without hesitation, I said, man, I don't know what the answer is. All I can think about right now is just pray. And I bowed my head and I began to pray. And it was about 4 or 5 or 6, sentences in, I realized what I had done. I'd forgotten where I was physically and that was not a normal mode of operation in banking. So I just lifted up my head and I took a peek, and the 5 or 6 people that were in that room with me all had their heads bowed and they all had their eyes closed and they were all praying, which just kind of reminded me that people are more open to including God in our work problems and in our workplace than we might realize. Now, I may not recommend what happened to me to everyone, to do, but it was it was a slip. And yet it's kind of humorous to see that, oh, that was well received. That was well received. So I think that for those that are working in the corporate world or this whole idea, and I wrote it down, God on the receiving end, but you also said God partners with us. So that is really strong. So how do you help other business leaders, Darren, with this concept? What does that look like? Whether it's through your publishing company or building websites or through your Theology of Business website. What does that look like? Because you told me before we hit the record button that this really was your passion. How do they find out about you, right? And how do you help them?
Yeah. Well, nowadays, a lot of people are finding out through the book and finding the book on Amazon and then reaching out. And so for listeners, I'd encourage you to get the book for sure, where you'll learn about these 37 biblical business habits that are ranging from your corporate purpose, marketing, accounting, customer care, risk management. There is a section on philanthropy, corporate philanthropy. And so there's an assessment people can take, which will give you an opportunity to kind of self-assess your company and your health in these different areas. And so taking that assessment, a lot of times the people who take it will meet one-on-one over Zoom, and we'll go through it and kind of look at some areas for improvement and ideas for implementation. And then we have a mastermind group where there is a group of business owners that are actually going through it. And we kind of jump around. We'll talk about your goals for your company one day, and then something comes up where we had a particular issue where one of our members' employees was going through just a really dark time, and So habit 22 talks about providing pastoral care for your employees and what is our responsibility in that regard. And incidentally, that providing pastoral care for your employees is consistently the lowest rated of all 37 habits. When people self-assess, they're just pretty convinced that they're not doing a good job in that area. And there's probably a variety of reasons for that. But
What do you
those are
think?
just a couple of
What
ways.
do you yeah? What do you think the reasons might be?
Well, I think it probably goes back to our theology, that, well, this is sort of a pastor's job, and I'm not a pastor. I'm just a business owner, and I just make money, and I just buy things for $1 and sell them for $2, and, just try to get people to help me make that happen. And all the while sort of losing sight of the fact that these are humans. These are people that have feelings and problems and families and struggles and goals and dreams, and I think they just don't know where to start, and they don't want to make things awkward. And so what a lot of companies will do is hire a corporate chaplain, the larger companies, so that those chaplains can go and really find out how the people are doing and pray with them. And so, you might not need to do that. I don't know. Particularly just depending on the size of your company. I mean, we've started to regularly ask our team members questions like, how can I pray for you? We pray for each other every week, together. And, what are your goals? We just had a great discussion about that. Like, where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years? Who is one of your, who's a person that you really respect, who has had a outsized impact, influence on your life? And it's just really interesting to find out, kind of what your team members, see as, what has helped to shape their value system, because their value system is now your company's value system, by default. And that's why you be careful who you bring on board with your company, because that culture, again, going back to this idea of making disciples, I really believe that the culture is making disciples in a way that no individual can make disciples. But we have the opportunity as individuals to make the culture, and that's our role. And so that's kind of a lot of different, I think, reasons for it.
Yeah, I want to explore that a little bit more with you because I think there's something there that I want to learn myself. How do I create, to use a different term, how do I create an environment that is healthy, that is learning, that is grace filled, that is that has a God consciousness, um, while at the same time establishing clear objectives and performance standards and these kinds of things. What are some of the things that you have seen through your writing and your coaching that other people are doing pretty well at creating those kinds of environments? Because I, I, I do believe that very strongly, that it almost comes back to that old phrase, remember, work on your business, not just in your business. It's like, if you can work on creating a culture, on an environment that is this, and this, it's probably going to produce the things that you're hoping for, not just for you selfishly, but for those that participate in that. What are some things that you have seen that has brought back that kind of fruit?
Well, a big one is starting with a sense of corporate purpose. Why does this company really exist? And I was just reading a Harvard Business Review study that the companies that have a clear purpose, they outperform their peers, in pretty much across the board. by about 5 to 7%. It was saying, which I would kind of think would be a little bit low, but that's just based on the numbers. And and so and then having, and this is something that we're really working with our group right now on, is not just having the purpose, but what are the goals that will help that purpose to materialize in a way that everybody in the company can rally around it, and will know that this is more than just a plaque on the wall or just a statement that, we hired a consultant to help us develop, but we really own this, and it's evident because we have goals and metrics to express that purpose and bring it into reality. So it's not just, well, our goal is to make more money. Well, why? That's not really, you know, for example, we had this video production company, and he was trying to figure out really how to articulate their purpose. And I'm not going to remember exactly what the purpose statement was, but it was something along the lines of inspiring, um, and like inspiring, entertaining, like getting a particular response from people through video production. And so how do you know if you're actually doing that, like if you're actually achieving that goal? Well, you have to measure it. You have to find out from your clients, okay, did we actually help you meet your goal? Like, not just, are you happy with us, but to, do you, on a scale of, 0 to 9 or 1 to 10 or whatever, to what extent did you achieve the initial objective that you had for this film, this video, whatever it was you were making for your company or your church or whatever it was? And then at the end of that, did it have the intended effect? And he was not measuring that, but that will be a game changer to really indicate for him and his team, to help them know that we're not just saying that this is what we do, but here's the proof. We're not perfect, but we are certainly delivering on what our stated purpose is, because we've got those goals. We have a way to measure it. So that's one of the foundational things I would say.
Yeah, so that seems to fit in the idea of clarity and communication and direction, right? Something like that. That if we know where we're going, we know what we're trying to do. That in itself has a way of initiating a healthy environment. Anything else you can think of that you've seen out there that's creating the culture?
Yeah. Well, certainly that habit 22 about providing pastoral care. I think we've got to do a better job of helping our people know that we don't just view you as a cog in a wheel, but we know that you are a human. You are a human being, and we're here for a higher purpose. And we know that you have a higher purpose than just helping us buy things for $1 and sell them for $2. So what is that purpose? What are your dreams, and how can we help you achieve those? With the resources and the responsibilities that you have here in this company. And I mean, I think that also makes a profound impact. Another one would be to make sure that you are not, that you're not over promising and under delivering. And so a lot of companies are actually doing this nowadays. So what we say in habit 9 is to prohibit manipulative marketing tactics. And because Proverbs 11:1 says, a false balance is an abomination to the Lord. Colossians 3:9 says, "Do not lie to each other, since you have taken off your old self with its practices." And because it's very tempting to overpromise, or another way that people overpromise is they chart, and I've seen this in the construction business, where because we also do some real estate stuff, where they'll give you a low bid uh, so they can get your business and take it away from somebody else. It gives a higher bid, but it's probably more of a realistic bid, and then they're going to continue to raise the price as you go. It's like, oh, this was not foreseen, or this is going to take more work, but they've already got their equipment up there. You're already invested into it. So to turn back now would cost a lot more money. So there are a lot of deceitful marketing tactics out there. So that's just a couple.
It's funny how telling the truth is always in vogue, right? I mean, uh, when you were thinking about different references in the book of Proverbs, I thought, I was thinking a parallel with you that hope deferred makes the heart sick. And when you create hope either through promises, that you're making, whether it's through your marketing or your speech, or you're trying to woo that person on the team, or whatever, and then you fall flat on your face, with the opposite experience, it poisons the water. And sometimes it's almost better to say, just want you to know that we're in a rough season. We're looking at climbing a hill. You may not want to come on. But that doesn't sound like a very exciting pitch. But for some people, that's good. They go, okay, so I'm walking into a battle knowing that now I'm more equipped and I'm ready, I'm ready to go for whatever reason they want to, take that on. Um, right. I mean,
Of the two sons, where one son says, "Yeah, I'm going to go to work for you, Dad," but he actually didn't. And then the other one said, I probably got too much going on that day, but then he ends up showing up anyway. And it's pretty intense, like the actual in context there, because Jesus is saying that the former, the one that said he was going to go and doesn't go, really characterizes the people that are cut off from God, and the ones that they underpromised but they over delivered. They're going to make it. They're going to be grafted in, as we read about later in the New Testament. And so I think God takes that issue very, very seriously, letting our yes be yes and our no be no. And hey, if you're not charging enough, you got to charge more. You got to establish some tiered pricing, and manage. I don't think it's enough to just under promise and over deliver, but to make your communications very clear, and so you can manage your customers' expectations, so they know what they're going to get, when they're going to get it, and that they always know what the next step is in the process.
yeah, there's all kinds of small-minded business decisions that are made every day, and some of them are rampant right now, right? I mean, one of them is that they're going to, if you're going to use your credit card, they're going to go ahead and charge you the 2.9% or whatever it is that, they want to pass on, instead of doing business like a big boy. And if they need to improve their, raise their prices, to cover that business expense, then, but to pass the business expense on in that way, you just walk away. And I know this sounds harsh to say, but you go, that's a small-minded, whoever's behind the curtain there, it's a small-minded individual that you really don't want to get too involved with, because you're not going to get to the next level. Here's another one where we were at a restaurant about a year ago. And of course, the commodities are up and down. I get it. Things are squirrely. Everything's been squirrely since COVID. And, we're not water snobs, but we like our water to taste pretty good. So one way to hedge the bet on that is you order a slice of lemon if you like lemon. And so we ordered a slice of lemon each. And the server said, well, I got to let you know that if you want a slice of lemon, it's going to cost you a quarter, and I thought to myself, a quarter, who cares about a quarter? But why would you, why would you do that? It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And back to your theology of business, I think that a lot of leaders here that are listening right now, maybe you've never really thought about it this way, but if you go back to the law of the Lord, the engineering of the Lord, the architecture of the Lord, the creativity of the Lord, you're. In fact, I want to ask you this question, Darren. So, this business that you're leading, or that you're co-leading, or that whatever, this ministry, and but particularly the business and the business world. When you get to work with these business owners or these business leaders, and you start talking about these concepts, like God is partner with you, right? Not just He's a receiver of your goods and services, but He's also a partner with you, and not just you, but or on the receiving end, like you said earlier, your employees, people working on the loading dock, wherever they are, these people are receiving in. Does that seem to resonate pretty fast with people, and or do they have the but mentality? Are they able to push that away and say that's not, they have enough problems of their own, they don't need to be thinking about that? What are you experiencing in this effort, that you are putting out to the world?
It's been very well received. And I mean, the framework, because I've been developing this framework over the last 10 plus years, and I think it's a lot more clear for people than it has been, that I've been able to present it in the past. But yeah, there have been some objections to the idea that my company can be a Christ-centered company, as you would imagine. I think we're alluding to, and so I actually addressed several of those objections right up front in the book, because I knew that some of them were going to have them. For example, most of our team members and customers aren't Christians, so how can we be a Christ-centered company? Well, do you require everyone who comes to your church to be a Christian? Like, you would consider everyone who's actually a part of the body of Christ, the bride of Christ, to be Christian. Yeah, they would be born again into the family of God. But to be able to come into the company, or to be able to come into the church, or hire a contractor that's going to come fix the HVAC system for the church, like, you're not going to require them to be a Christian. At least I wouldn't think. So you don't have to even announce it publicly that, hey, we're going to let the whole world know, we're going to let the whole market know that the whole purpose of what we're doing here is to glorify God. Now, there are some very successful companies like Chick-fil-A and Hobby Lobby and many others that have made that very public stance in their statement of purpose, like that this is who we are. Or that my business partner isn't a Christian, so we can't implement. First of all 37 of these habits in the book, I share real world applications from actual Christ-centered companies. Most of those that are part of the C12 organization that you and your listeners might be aware of, not just C12, but others as well. So there's living proof that all of these things can be and are being done in for-profit companies. So hopefully that's kind of disarming for people. Probably the biggest one is, I'm not the owner of the company. So how can I actually do this? So I refer to the reader of this book as not a Christ-centered company owner, but a Christ-centered company influencer. Because even if you don't own the company, if you didn't have some influence in that company, they wouldn't be paying you. And so while you might not be able to stroke the check to hire a corporate chaplain, for example, you can at least advocate and say, hey, I got a team member who, their spouse is in the hospital and is like terminally ill. Like, what can we do about that? And to advocate that the company really get behind that employee in their time of need. You don't have to be the owner to do that. You don't have to be the owner to call out if a business practice looks shady. Like I've known folks working in the fitness industry, which has been notorious for um, you know, having these massive joining fees and a lot of smoke and mirrors with the pricing. A lot of other industries notorious for that. One I was just dealing with in the the website hosting business, where they'll say, oh, your rate is going to be, uh, you know, $10 a month. Oh, that sounds awesome. And then a year later, you realize you're paying more like $60 a month. And this is not uncommon. But hey, they got your business and they know how hard it is for people to transfer their websites over to new servers. And so they're going to be, because they don't want their website to go down in the middle of that. But you can advocate and say, hey, this is a shady practice, and I'm feeling a little icky about this. Like, can you explain to me how this is, really an ethical way to do our marketing? And so, or the objection that, well, my company is too small to do all these things. And so I talk about business law and conflict in the book. You might not have had a lawsuit. You might not have had to go down that path, but you need to know about mediation and arbitration. And I was just actually had one of the guys in our group has a mediation arbitration company for construction companies. And he just mediated a dispute this past week with two guys in my church that are getting ready to sue each other over a house that's trying to get built. And so even if the habits aren't, if all of the habits aren't necessarily right, a top priority for you right now, you need to make sure that all of these things are accounted for, because they will happen. They will become something that you face in your company.
That's good. I've worked with some leaders in publicly traded companies, for example, which of course is more complicated than that. The street, owns the company, and often culture speaks into the company, and that's pretty frankly how it works. But I've seen leaders in publicly traded companies where they learn to become principle centered in their leadership. And by principle centered, I mean principles. They create principles, much of which they have learned from scripture. And some of them come directly from scripture, word for word. Others are wordsmithed a little differently. And some come from their own creativity that is probably exegeted, from scripture in some way, shape, or form. And then as they begin to practice those, some call them pillars, some call them principles, some call them guiding values. They have different names for them. But then what happens is, once those things are honored and appreciated for the difference that they're making in their workplace, on their team, in their division, whatever it might be, often they get feedback where they say, where did you get those? Where did you come up with those? And then, of course, that opens a wonderful opportunity of conversation, for sure. Um, this is good. What is your hope for the future for this um, passion of yours?
Yeah, well, I would like to see more and more business owners begin to look at their companies as well, to be able to see Jesus on the receiving end of everything that is done in and through the company. He's not just the source of everything, but he's on the receiving end of everything. And so I think that raises uh, the level of accountability, and it also I think would raise the sense of meaning and purpose in what we're doing. By and the ones that have the greatest purpose, I think, really will outperform, as the studies have shown, outperform the other companies. And all of, seek first the kingdom, and all these things will be added to you, right? And so, but this book is a very helpful framework. And it's every habit has a scriptural foundation. I'll share the biblical basis for it, and then real world examples, not from companies where God is officially irrelevant, but Christ-centered companies, mostly private-owned Christian-led companies, who are actually doing these things. And because I just it just grieves me the way that we continue to think about doing ministry as, let's just get people to a church and go plant more churches so we can do that same thing on Sunday morning. It's just not working. More Christian content is not what is needed. What's needed is because the culture is going to make disciples in a way that no individual, and certainly no pastor, can. And so the primary culture that people rub up against and are influenced by on a daily basis is the culture of the company in which they work. So we just have an
True.
incredible opportunity.
That is so true. Absolutely true. Darren, tell us one more time the name of the book that you are referring to, and I know we can get it on Amazon.
Yeah, it's the Christ Center Company, and yeah, they can get it on Amazon.
Very
And
good.
there's also that assessment that people can
Yeah.
take if you want to just kind of get a sense of what this is about. And if you want to go through your company's assessment with me personally, I'd love to do that.
Awesome opportunity for those listening. Darren, thank you so much for the time that you shared with us today. I really love what you're doing. I know that it's a cliche now, but it really can make the world a better place for not just the business owner, but those that are engaging with them. But not just for the sole proprietor, but also for leaders that find themselves in a more complicated situation. So I appreciate your vision. I appreciate your thoughts, your ideas, your words, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Jim. Thanks for the great questions.